Today, Kuf Beis Amid Beis by the top Mishnah. There's 3 Mishnayos on this page, the top Mishnah. It says, Machzirin Tzira Tachten B'Mikdash Avalev Medina. Talking about construction in Shabbos, binyan. Rashi tells us we're not dealing with an actual house. We're dealing with a cupboard, some sort of box or some sort of cabinet. So there's 2 hinges. There's a hinge on the bottom and there's a hinge on the top. Now the hinge is not on the side. The hinge is the pivot that goes on underneath the edge of the door, and then another pivot on the top. So they would just push it into place. If the lower one falls out, the door is still in place, but it's going to not turn right. So that you're allowed to fix in the Beis Hamikdash, but you're not allowed to fix it in the rest of the country. What's the problem? The problem is that you may take out the tools and do it and fix it. It looks like building. But if the upper one falls out, then the door mamish falls off, then kan v'kan aser. Then that's already considered binyan. And Rashi tells us that we're dealing with the opinion that holds yesh binyan b'kelim. Taisvis has a problem with this. He doesn't think that we're mixing into a machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel over here, yesh binyan b'kelim or not. Okay. Rashi's learning that the discussion here is all about kelim, and you're fixing the door means you're putting it totally back into place. That's the problem with the Elyon. That's it. Kan v'kan aser. Whether it's in the Beis Hamikdash or whether it's everywhere else, it's aser. Rabbi Yehuda says the Elyon b'mikdash v'tachten Medina. He takes it all one step up. He says that the upper hinge, the Elyon, the upper hinge, that you're allowed to fix in the Beis Hamikdash, and the lower hinge you're allowed to fix in the rest of the country, which we said before the lower hinge you weren't allowed to fix. Rabbi Yehuda argues, he says the lower hinge you're allowed to fix. What's exactly the svar of Rabbi Yehuda? I'm not sure. What's the difference to mikdash or not? We have a rule, ain't supposed to be mikdash, that if it's a din derabanan, and it's something that's necessary, you need something from the cabinet and you can't get it out because the door isn't fixed right, so you can fix it. Tan Rabbanan. Start in a brisa. The Gemara tells us tzir, the hinge of a delis, of a door of shida teva migdal, of a cabinet. B'mikdash machzirin. You can put it back on in the Beis Hamikdash. B'medina doichken. In the rest of the country, you're not allowed to put it totally back in, but you're allowed to just push it in. If it's not entirely broken, then you're allowed to just push it back into place. Yeah, we need Dr. Stein's Bahamut doors. That's those folding doors. They come out all the time from that little hinge. The upper hinge, kan v'kan leyachzer. That you can't return anywhere because that's mamish putting the door back into place. Gezeira shemiyitka. Rashi tells us that this term, Gezeira shemiyitka, is not a continuation of the last sentence. It's a continuation. It's you have to skip back to the Medina doichkin. You're not allowed to put it back, mamish. Gezeira shemiyitka. You might put it into place in a strong way. Where's that Rashi? Tachteina b'Medina Kai. Yeah. The reason why Rashi says that is because he has a problem with saying it as a continuation of the sentence that comes right before. And the problem is, in the Beis Hamikdash, you don't have gezeres. So what does it mean? That you can't say Kan v'kan means both in the Beis Hamikdash and and the rest of the country. That's what kan v'kan means. Here or here, here or there. So I can't say here or there when I'm talking about a gzeira, because there are no gzeiras in the base of English. It must be only talking about the sentence before, which is referring to the lower one, which was aser. And the rest of the country, that's a gzeira that you may end up banging it in. And if you do bang it in, that's a chiyuv chatas. When it comes to something that's actually attached to the ground, that's a different story. That's a different story, because that's not kalim. That's any small construction that's mamish attached to the ground is considered binyan. So over there you have to be more strict, and it's a chiyuv chatas. Is it referring to the bottom? Probably even the bottom one. That's what I'm assuming. So even the bottom you can't put back in. Okay, now we have a new Mishnah. Machzirin retiya b'mikdash avalim medina. This is a medicated bandage. It has an ointment on it, and if it falls off of a kayan in the base of Migdash, he's allowed to put it back on, but he's not allowed to put it back on in the rest of the country if it falls off. Now the reason is there's an issue with a medicated bandage that you may smooth out the ointment that's on it, and smoothing is like erasing, which is making it smooth. It's associated with meichek or mamachek. I'm not sure.
The only question I had about that whole issue was whether sakanas nefashis, what happens with that? The guy could get an infection or something.
Right.
That's I didn't understand that whole issue.
Right. Over here, what we're dealing with is to smooth out the cream onto the bandage, fills in, makes the that's an issue. That's a problem. So what's our concern? That the kohen needs to do avodah. He's not allowed to do avodah if there's a chatzitza, an interruption between his hand and the keli. So he has a bandage on his hand. So we say that if you take it off, you're allowed to put it back on. That's going to help him take it off. If we tell him that you won't be able to put it back on, then he may not take it off. Then he won't. If he doesn't take it off, he won't do the service. So it's playing with the service. And with that, we don't want to do it. We don't want to mess with the avodah. So we say you're allowed to take it off, you'll be allowed to put it back on. But Medina not in the rest of the country. In Betchila, kan v'kan aser. But to put it on in the first place, that's aser. Why? Because to put it on in the first place, even in the base of Migdash, that's what he's telling me. It's a shvus, it's a gzeira, you might smooth it out and all of this. So ain't shvus b'mikdash, you should be allowed to do it. That has nothing to do with the avodah. For the avodah, just do the avodah. You don't have a bandage on, go do the avodah. The ein shvus b'mikdash is only relevant for things that are for avodah. It's not just like you just walk into the base of Migdash and then all of a sudden you can do any derabanan. No, it's the derabanans that are necessary for the service. So if you're wearing a bandage, then we say you can put it back on because you needed to take it off to do the service. But if you're never wearing it, then putting it back on has nothing to do with the service. Taner Rabbanan. Start in the Brisa. Ritiya shaper shamel gabi amaka. Here we're not talking about in the base of English. We're talking about that the bandage came off a person's hand. What's the din? Machzirim b'Shabbos. You're allowed to put it back on. Oh, interesting. Right? We didn't see that. Rabbi Yehuda says not necessarily. If it slipped down below the wound, machzir and lamaila, you're allowed to push it back on. It didn't have mamish come off. Lamaila, if it pushed above the wound, that means it's not in its proper place. You can push it back onto the wound. You're allowed to do this to wash to clean off the wound. What you do is you just open one end and then you clean it off. You open the other end and you clean that off, but you never take it off entirely. Daniel, it sounds like Mashiach, right? by the gates of Rome. But you can't clean off the bandage because that's smoothing out the ointment that's on it. And if you do smooth that out, that's a chiyuv chatas. So Rabbi Yehuda has a stricter opinion than the Tanna Kama. According to Rabbi Yehuda, you're not allowed to put it back on. You can only move it up or move it down. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Halachik Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says, name of Shmuel, the Halachik Rabbi Yehuda, the stricter opinion. Amar Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda says, that machlekes between the Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda about if you're allowed to put a bandage back on or if you have to keep it on and just move it from the side to the side to be able to clean it and all of that, that is if you took the bandage off and you put it onto a vessel. So in other words, you didn't really take it off. This reminds me of taking the pot off the fire and putting it down. That you're not supposed to put it back on. Chazara it depends. If you put it on the ground, that's a bigger deal. But if you put it just onto a keli, it's not really like you put it down. So here we're saying something similar. We're saying if you took the bandage off, but you didn't put it on the ground, you just put it onto another keli. So then that's when Rabbi Yehuda says, that's when the Tanna Kama says you're allowed to put it back on. And Rabbi Yehuda says you have to move it from side to side. You can't really take it off either. But if you took it off and put it on the ground, according to Rav Chisda, then everyone would agree that you can't return it, even the Tanna Kama. It's a strict view, Rav Chisda's view. Amar Mar Baravashi says, Havikim Kamei Abba. I was standing in front of my father. Nafalei Abesadia. The bandage fell off and it fell onto the cushion, this pillow. And he starts putting it back on. I said to him, does the master not hold? Don't you hold like Rav Chisda? Rav Chisda says that the whole machlekes Tanna Kama and Rabbi Yehuda is regarding if it goes on to a keli, which is this case. True, which is this case. But if it goes onto the ground, then everyone agrees that you can't return it. And he's putting it back on. But so far there's no problem because it went onto a keli and he's putting it back on, and that's where the machlekes is. But to take it a step further, there becomes a huge problem. Shmuel, halachik Rabbi Yehuda. And Shmuel says halachik Rabbi Yehuda, who was the strict opinion. The whole machlekes was only if it falls off onto a keli, it doesn't fall onto the ground here. The ritia, the medicated bandage fell onto we're on Kuf Beis Amud Beis, towards the bottom, right before the third Mishnah. Over here, the ritia, the bandage fell off onto the pillow. So it didn't fall onto the ground. The only problem is that Shmuel says the halach is like Rabbi Yehuda, who says that even onto a keli it's also. So Amar Li, Ravashi says to his son, Marbar Ravashi, I never heard of that, but it doesn't mean I didn't hear of that. It means I don't hold of that. Like Vas. Okay. Rather, what does Ravashi hold? He holds the machlekes is when it's on the ground. Where Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's aser. If it was taken off and put on the ground, then Rabbi Yehuda holds it's aser to put it back, and the Tanna Kama holds that it's mutter to put it back. But if it went onto a keli, everyone agrees. Okay, thank you. Everyone agrees that it's acceptable. That's where Ravashi was putting it back. Okay, a new Mishnah. Kaishrin Nima b'mikdash avalei b'medina. We're talking about a musical instrument. Now, there's a Gemara Sukkah that discusses when the music, the music that was performed during the sacrifice, is the main thing the singing, or is the main thing the instruments? And from that Gemara, it seemed like that this sugi over here is only going to go according to the opinion that holds the main thing is the musical instrument. And the singing that went along was just an accompaniment to the musical instrument. That's what we're talking about. So there's a musical instrument, and one of the strings snaps. So it says you're allowed to tie it back up because it's a mitzvah to play those instruments during the sacrifice, the pouring of the wine of the sacrifice. You're allowed to tie it up. But you're not allowed to tie it up. You're not allowed to fix a string on a harp or a guitar or something. But originally, to put a string on that was broken already from before, or just to put on a new string, that's for sure us, or even in the Beis Hamikdash. Why? Because you could have done it yesterday. I couldn't have tied up the string yesterday because it broke today. So it was impossible yesterday. It only broke today. So when it breaks today, then I'm allowed to fix it because I need it for the carbon. Call this machshiri mitzvah. It's not a mitzvah to have the instrument, it's a mitzvah to play the instrument. And machshire, this is preparation to be able to play. Okay. Baraminu. There's a contradiction. It says, Nimas kinar shenifsaka loyhaya koshra ala ainva. If a harp string breaks, you don't tie it, you don't knot it, rather, you make it into a bow. Tie a bow instead of a knot. Our Mishnah said that you're allowed to tie it into a knot. Koshrin. Koshrin means to make a knot. Einvin means you make a bow. So the Gemara answers, we're going to have, I think, 5 answers. We're going to have 5 answers to this contradiction. Like Kasha, Harabanan Harabel Lezer. It's a Machlekes Rabbanan Rabbi Lezer. We had this Machlekes in Masechta Shabbos. Oh, thank you. Beautiful. Thank you. That's the tip. We had in Masechta Shabbos Rabbi Lezer discussing what you're allowed to do to prepare for a bris. Rabbi Eliezer, this is Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkenes, he had very lenient opinions about preparations for a mitzvah on Shabbos. He said you're even allowed to make coal for the blacksmith to make the knife to be able to make the bris on Shabbos. All of that could have been done before Shabbos. He also is still allowed to do it on Shabbos. The Rabbanan argued. The Rabbanan said, no, you're only allowed to do what is necessary for today and that you weren't able to do before. So the Rabbi Lezer, according to Rabbi Lezer, that says that you're allowed to do anything for the mitzvah on Shabbos, all the preparations, so make the knot. The Rabbanan, according to the Rabbanan that say you're not allowed to. So that's the Brisa. They say oinva. They say you have to make a bow. And a bow is less of a knot than a knot. And on Shabbos, you're not allowed to tie knots, right? Kesha shel kayama, or if it's a umnin, if it's a... So they tell you to make a bow because they hold you not allowed to do preparations. The Gemara asks the question. What we just said was that Rebbe Lezer is the opinion of our Mishnah. Our Mishnah's opinion of Rebbe Lezer that says that you're allowed to tie a knot on a string on a harp in the Beis Hamikdash. Problem is, if you read further in the Mishnah, it says Vim b'tchila kan v'kan aser. Can't do it initially. Can't put in the string initially. The Gemara asks the question, Rebbe Lezer, I feel lechatchila nami. Our Mishnah can't be Rebbe Lezer. Rebbe Lezer would hold that you're allowed to do it initially as well. I'm afraid it's going to spill. When it spills, it makes it bigger. So that's a kasha. We can't say it's Rebbe Lezer. because the Sefer of the Mishnah doesn't fit. Ella, the Gemara answers, Ella, we're retracting. Ella means we retract from the Gemara's last answer. Ella like Kasha, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbanan. This we had recently, actually. Rabbi Yehuda was the opinion, we're talking about tefillin knots. Rabbi Yehuda was the opinion that says that a bow is considered a knot. So Rabbi Yehuda says, Kaisher, you tie it, because what's the difference, a bow or a knot? If they're both a knot, so tie it. There's a knot works better. And the Rabbanan say, no, a bow is not a knot. So on Shabbos, when I'm not allowed to tie a knot, tie a bow. So who's the Brisa that says you tie a bow? That's the Rabbanan. Who says you tie a real knot? That's Rabbi Yehuda that says a bow is just as bad as a knot, so you might as well tie a knot. The Gemara says, Rabbi Yehuda aliba deman. The problem is, I understand the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan say that I tie a bow because a bow is not a real malacha. The string broke, so I tie a bow. But Rabbi Yehuda holds that a bow is the same as a knot. So therefore, you might as well tie a knot. But who said you're allowed to tie a bow or a knot? If it's a bow is a problem. And for sure a knot is a problem. Who says you're allowed to do that? So who's he going like? Probably he's following Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer holds that you're allowed to do malachas, preparation for a mitzvah, even if it's a malacha. You're allowed to do it on Shabbos. Now we're back to our old question. Then why does the Mishnah say that you're not allowed to make a knot l'chatchila? According to Rabbi Eliezer, he holds that machshiri mitzvah I'm allowed to do even l'chatchila. Can't be. We're back to the question that we had on answer number 1. Ela kasha, we're up to answer 3. We're going to retract from this answer. We'll try again. Rab Shimon Harabbanan. So really, a machlekes Rab Shimon and Rabbanan. We're just asking a contradiction between the Mishnah and the Brisa. Are you allowed to tie a knot or are you allowed to tie a bow? So it goes like this. The Tanya was taught in the Brisa. Ben Levi, the playing of the instrument. Shenifsakali Nima Bekina. Ben Levi, a Levite, that the harp string broke. Kaisha, he's allowed to tie it. Talking about on Shabbos. Reb Shimon Aimer Ainva. Shimon says you make a bow. Reb Shimon ben Elazar Aimer Afi Eina Mashmas Asakol. Says that's if you make a bow in the musical instrument, it's not going to make the right sound. What do you have to do? It's very interesting. Rashi tells us that their instruments had a peg that you twist it to make it tighter, just like we have on the violins and the guitars, all of that, a peg that you twist. I bet we have old instruments also, but it's interesting that Rashi describes it. So what this opinion is saying is that you have to take out the string and put in a new string. Just to tie it up is not going to give you the right sound. Your mama should just redo the whole thing. You have to put in a new string. So whatever the case is, we do have an opinion over here of Reb Shimon that holds that I'm allowed to tie a bow. And I have the opinion of the Tanna Kama that says and I'm allowed to tie a knot. So that's going to be the two opinions of the Mishnah and the Brisa. The only question is we didn't explain what they hold. Why am I allowed to tie a knot, according to the first opinion? So Rashi says,
how can everyone just say that I'm not going to go on the thing?
he holds that a bow is just as permanent as a knot. I guess it's a good question. But yeah, regarding Shabbos, that's his opinion. So there's a little bit of an issue here with this Gemara, because who does he hold like? Who does the Tanna Kama hold like that you're allowed to tie a knot? Nor does Reb Shimon hold that you're allowed to tie a bow. I know all the questions that we had on the previous Gemaras, they show up again. And because of those questions, we drop the previous answers. And why over here is just it's being accepted.
Question.
Yeah, Dr. Stein.
I'm imagining the harp, all right? And just think of a guitar or anything like that. When the string breaks, like you just said, whether you make a knot or a bow, you don't get the sound. It just doesn't work. And I saw
Right.
Daniel's head go like this when you had said
Right.
that. Perhaps they're really talking about something else. You're replacing a new string. It's got to go in the kind of little notch below and above. And usually, I think there's some sort, maybe they would make either a knot or a bow above and below so that it doesn't slide through. And perhaps the question is, in other words, totally not the old string being done, but making knots or bows in new strings that are replacing the old string. Anybody say?
Could be. It could be. The only thing that the only reason why I'm hesitating on saying that is because I see the third opinion holds that you have to put in a new string, but that would mean that the first opinions were holding that you weren't doing that. The only thing is that the third opinion that's saying that you put in the new string is saying that you're wrapping it up and down and wrapping it up. It sounds like there may be one string that's going through the harp that goes over and under, which that may be what he's saying that you're supposed to do. I don't know how many strings that. When you see a harp, is it one string that goes up and down over a loop, or is it different strings that are going up and down? Oh, that's the difference, the harp and the lyre. Lyre, I don't know what it is. I don't know, I'm making that up. I don't know, okay. So, okay, you may be correct. Oh, is that what you have in there? Oh, in that, very good, in that Tehillim. Is that from the fancy Tehillim? Very good. Very nice. Okay. So we have a little bit of a problem here. Rashi resolves the issue. He resolves the issue by saying that this opinion, the first opinion, holds like Rabbi Eliezer in one area, but it doesn't hold like Rabbi Eliezer in another area. It holds like Rabbi Eliezer that if there's no knot, that if it broke, I'm allowed to fix it. But it doesn't hold like Rabbi Eliezer that if I was able to do it yesterday, I'm still allowed to do it. So Rashi says, so why didn't we do that? Very good. So why didn't we answer that with the other opinions? With the first two answers, we asked, who does he hold it? Does he hold the Rabbi Eliezer? If he holds, then he has to say lechatchila also. I mean, you didn't give me that answer. So Rashi says, yeah, you don't make that up. But over here, we see clearly that he holds like Rabbi Eliezer in one opinion. Mamash states it clearly that you're allowed to tie a knot. Another one says you're allowed to tie a bow. How does that work? The bow. He must hold that a bow is not a real knot. Okay, same thing. And because he says that clearly, then I don't have the question that I had before. But who does he hold like all of them? Okay. Iba Yisema, fourth answer. Well, the first two didn't work, so this is really only a second answer. Iba Yisema, Hava Rabbanan. They're both following the opinion of the Rabbanan, which means you're not allowed to do things on Shabbos that you could have done beforehand. V'lai kasha, kan be'emtza kamin atzad. Depends where you have to make the knot. If the knot is in the center, if it broke in the center of the string, then, and I'm going to tie it in the center, then I need to have a knot, because the sound would be better if there's a knot there. But if it's on the side, on the edge of the string, it broke, so then I can make a bow and it won't affect the sound the same way. Iba Yisema, a fifth answer, or a third. Hava habemta, they're both in the center. Mar savar gozrinan and mar savar le gozrinan. Question is, do we say that because I'm allowed to make a knot in the center, and therefore, but on the side, I have to make a bow, because a bow is less of a knot, right? So here we're saying that how about the emtza? because I may end up making a knot on the side. On the side, I'm only allowed to make a bow. So therefore, because of that, we don't let you make the knot in the center either. It's a Gezerah. Gezerah, you may do it on the side. So therefore, what are we talking about here? We have two statements, a Mishnah and a Brisa. The Brisa says you have to make a bow. That's talking about, that's referring to, that's the opinion that holds that there's a Gezerah. If we allow you to make a knot in the center, you may end up making a knot on the side. So therefore, you have to make a bow, even in the center. Okay. Now we have a new Mishnah. You're allowed to cut off a wart that would be a mum on a carbon. The pshat here is that it's an animal, because it could be a mum on a kayan as well. But in most of the commentaries, it's referring to the animal. There's a wart on the animal, and you want to bring it as a carbon. So it's not a problem. You can cut off the wart, and then it's acceptable. So the only thing is, what about on Shabbos? So you're allowed to cut it off in the Beis Hamikdash, but not in the rest of the country. It's a special heter for the Beis Hamikdash. Even this, we're going to see that it's really, you're not allowed to use a knife to cut it off. You have to use your hand to break it off, probably your fingernails. And what's the heter? The heter is that it's kalacha yad. You're doing it in abnormal fashion, which is only a rabbinic law. And we have a rule in Shvus B'Mikdash that there's no laws, no rabbinic laws in the Beis Hamikdash if it affects the service. The imbekeli, if you want to use a utensil, kan v'kan aser, then it's aser everywhere, even in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay. It's written a little strange. It was aser even by the Yad, the Medina. No, it's written funny. There's something in there. I don't know exactly. Okay, Veramino. The Gemara has a question. This is an introduction to Masechtas Pesachim, which we start on Monday, giving us a little taste. So, Hertivo v'avasei mechutz l'trom v'chatichas yabalta ein deichen. If you have a carbon Pesach, you have to get it to the Beis Hamikdash, but the problem is you're out of the tchum, or it has a wart, and you can't slaughter it. So to carry it on your shoulder with the heter of saying Chai Noisias Atzman, anything alive is not considered carrying, or to cut off a wart some permissible way, that's ein deichen. That does not push it off Shabbos, and you're not allowed to do it. What do? I don't know. You have to figure out some other animal. Rabbi Eliezer Medeichen. Rabbi Eliezer says no. No, I know Rabbi Eliezer's opinion. He holds that machshirei mitzvah are permissible on Shabbos. So getting it there, michutz l'tchum, you could have done that on Friday. Cutting off the wart, I believe you could have done before as well, right? So, unless maybe it grew today. But Rabbi Eliezer says that it doesn't matter. It's mutter anyway. Okay, what's our problem? We have a contradiction here. The contradiction is that over here we said that cutting off the wart is ein deichen. It doesn't push off Shabbos. And the Mishnah said that it's chaytchen, that it does push off Shabbos. Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yosef ben Rabbi Chanina. Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yosef ben Chanina, these are two Amoraim in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Elazar is Rabbi Elazar ben Pedas. They each give an answer. Now this gets a little confusing for us because they don't tell us who says what. And we're going to have to discuss their answers. And we don't have a name to attribute to either one because it's Chad Amar and Chad Amar. So we'll have to call answer A and answer B. We don't know who says what. Okay, so it goes like this. We're trying to answer a contradiction. Are you allowed to cut off this wart on Shabbos? The Mishnah, the Mishnah or Brisa in Pesachim says you're not allowed to. In Masechtas Eiruvin, it says you are allowed to.
Is it clear that he's doing it in the Beis Hamikdash?
You're going to see soon. Very good.
Okay.
That's going to come out. Very good. You read that carefully. At the end, that's going to be one of the pshatim. Okay, Chad Amar, one says, Hava Habalacha. Both of them are dealing with the wart that when you cut it off, it's actually cutting it off. It's not a dry wart. But like kasha, but there's still no problem. Kan biyad, kan bekeli. Very nice answer. The Mishnah is talking about biyad, you're allowed to. And in Psachim, it's talking about bekeli, which our Mishnah also agrees to. The Mamash says it. So there's no machlekes. There's no contradiction. They each agree with each other. Depends if you're using a utensil or if you're doing it kalach hayad. Kalach hayad means that you're doing it in an abnormal way, which is using your finger to take off a wart. It's abnormal. Chad Amar, the other one answers, Hava habiyad. Both of them you're doing it in an abnormal way. But like kasha, there's no question because habalacha habiyabesha. Seems like a strict view. You're doing it in an abnormal way, and the Mishnah in Pesachim says you're still not allowed to do it because it's a real wart. It's lacha. It has the moisture in it, and the Mishnah that says you're allowed to is yevesha. It's dry and it just like crumbles off. So it's not really cutting something off, dead skin or something. Okay, so the second view, answer B, is more strict. Answer A tells me kalach hayad is mutter. Answer B tells me kalach hayad is asur. It's only if it's not a wart that it's not a problem. Lamanda amar habiyad habekeli, according to the first answer, that it says if you do it kalach hayad, you're doing it by hand, and which is an abnormal way. My tayima lo yamar habalacha biyabesha. Why didn't they say the more stricter answer that it depends if it's moist or dry? Why didn't they say the other answer? They could have answered the other way, and you want to have come up with the heter. So it says, "Well, Amalach, I'll say to you, Yevesha afilu b'keli nami shari." If it's dry, they hold you're even allowed to use a keli. Why? My time afrucha yefrecha. It's just going to crumble off. The keli is not really doing anything, so it's not really cutting. It just crumbles. By the way, what's the malacha here of cutting off a wart? Rashi says it's geizes. It's like shearing the wool. Nachreinim have questions on it. What's the pshat? Geizes. Geizes is when you want to make the wool. Just cutting hair. I mean, what are you going to do with it? It may have to do with, it does grow back, or maybe the skin replay. I'm not sure exactly, but Rashi calls it geizes, or maybe a tolda of geizes, cutting it off. Okay, now we question answer B, the stricter answer. According to the one that says that the difference between Eiruvin and Pesachim about cutting off the wart is, if it depends if it's wet, moist, or dry. My time, why didn't they give us the heter kalach hayad? So malach bekeli, he says to you, if you're trying to tell me a heter of bekeli, of biyad, and you're coming to tell me an isser of bekeli, hatanan, in bekeli kan v'kanasir. Why do I even need a Mishnah in Pesachim? It must be a Mishnah. Why do I need a Mishnah in Pesachim to tell me that I'm not allowed to do it bekeli? The Mishnah in Eiruvin already told me I'm not allowed to do it bekeli. It's just a repetition. Our Mishnah told me everything. Biyad is mutter and bekeli is asur. I need a Mishnah Pesachim to tell me bekeli is asur. We already have it. Now, I don't know if it's the already concept of this, because we have a rule, ain't say de la Mishnah, in certain areas, ain't say de la Mishnah between the different Masechtas. You can't say, well, you said it already in Eiruvin, and in the Daf Yomi cycle, Pesachim comes after Eiruvin. So I don't know if you can do that with Rebbe, because they may not have taught the Masechtas in the same order. But the point is that if I had it clearly in another Masechta that it says it, so why do you have to say it over there? Everything was already detailed We already itemized. We already have all of these details. The idach, what does the other opinion do? Why is there this redundancy? It says it again in the same halacha that it says by us. It repeats in Psachim. Now, there's the whole difference between Eiruvin and Psachim is biyad the bekeli, according to that first answer. That biyad is mutter bekeli is asur, so that it said in Eiruvin. What are you telling me in Psachim? That biyad, that bekeli is asur. He says like this: Hadik tani hasam, mishum dekaboya flugi Rabbi Elazar v'Rabbanan. We have a chiddush over there. I'm sorry. That's a question. Okay, so we have the Mishnah over there that says the Mishnah in Psachim says that biyad, that bekeli is asur, and by us it already says bekeli is asur. So why does it have to say it again? So it says the Mishnah over there is telling you one thing that we don't have here. We have Rabbi Eliezer's view. Coming to tell me that there's a machlekes Rabbanan and Rabbi Eliezer that we didn't have over here. Rabbi Elezer's view is that it's mutter because mashiri mitzvah are mutter. It's a good point. It's not just a redundancy. It says that we have an added point in that in Masechet Psachim that we don't have. V'idach, if that's the case, then what does the other opinion do? That says that no, it's just redundant. It's dumya der kivu v'avachim mechutz l'tchum katani derabanan. So I don't need that. I don't need to mention Yabelas, because what are you telling me? That there is machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan. I have here kivu v'avasim mechutz l'tchum. That's an issa derabanan. Cutting off the Yabelas according to this opinion, according to opinion B, it's balacha and it's bekeli. No, it's biyad. It's biyad. According to this opinion, both prices, both Mishnayos rather, are dealing with that you're cutting it off biyad. It's both kalacha yad. And nevertheless, it depends if it's moist or dry. And the Mishnah in Psachim is talking about where it's moist. That's why it's asur. And the Mishnah by us, even though it's kalacha yad, even though you're using your hand to do it. So it's saying like this. You're trying to tell me that there's some sort of benefit in saying that Mishnah there, even though it already says it by us. And you're telling me that benefit is that there's a machlekes Rabbi Eliezer and the Rabbanan, which it didn't say by us. He says there's nothing added by the Yabelas, by the cutting off the word. Because taking it on your shoulder, carrying it in Rosh Hashanah, and carrying it in Mechutz L'Tchum, both of those are also the Rabbanan. And I see over there that there's a machlekes, the Chachamim are machmer, even by a derabanan, and the Rebbe Elezer's mekel. What are you telling me? Cutting off the Yabelas? That's also derabanan. It's biyad. It's kalachayad. So you're not adding anything by saying the Yabelas. V'idach, go back to the first opinion, that there's a chiddush here in the machlekes between Rabbanan and Rebbe Eliezer that we have to say the Yabelas, and that's why it's important to repeat it. The other opinion says, "Kivu the like Rab Nasan the Merchayin Isias Atzmei Avasim Mechutz L'Tchum Kerab Kivu Dem T'chum Deraisa." Over there's no chiddush in the Rabbanan if you don't tell me the Yabelas, because over there it's an Issa Deraisa. Why? It's carrying an animal. He says, yeah, that's only Rab Nasan that holds carrying an animal is acceptable because Chayin Isias Atzmei. The Rabbanan over here don't hold like the Rab Nasan. They hold that carrying a live animal is also a deraisa. Tchumen is only a derabanan. He says, no, we're going like Rabbi Akiva that says Tchumen is deraisa. So you want to tell me about that the Rabbanan are machmer even on a derabanan? The first opinion, Tanakama is machmer even on a derabanan. that you can't cut off, that you can't cut off a yabelis, that would be the derabanan, because cutting it off biyad. So it needs to repeat that for a special reason. Okay. We have a kasha now on the first answer. First answer says the difference is biyad or bekeli. Is it kalach or yad? That's when it's mutter, and psachim is bekeli. Master Rabbi Yosef. Rabbi Yosef has a question. Amar Rabbi Lazar responds, kal v'chaimer. I have a kal v'chaimer for you. Ma shchita shemish malacha. Shchita is a real malacha. Leiches Shabbos, and it pushes off Shabbos. Elu shemisham shvus in a din sheyitchus Shabbos. These things are only derabanan. Don't you agree? If you're allowed to shech the karban, which is mamish and malacha, don't you agree that you should be allowed to cut off a wart, which is only a derabanan? It's strong kasha. Why was I not allowed to cut off the wart according to the Rabbanan? According to the Tanakhama? Two options. Either because it's a keli. That was answer A. So answer B was it was biyad, but it was lacha. If I say I'm using a keli, then it's a deraisa. What's Rebbe Lazar's kal v'chaimer telling the Rabbanan? That if I'm allowed to do shchita, which is a deraisa for sure, I should be allowed to do a derabanan. What do you mean I should be allowed to do a derabanan? It's a deraisa. It's using a keli according to that teretz. It's strong kasha on the first answer. Elam Rabbi Yosef gives his own answer. Hava biyad. Both of them are talking about biyad. You ready, Daniel? Shvus mikdash itiru. A shvus of a karban they allowed in the base of mikdash. Shvus the mikdash b'medina alay itiru. Where are you cutting off the wart? Over there it doesn't say you're cutting it off in the base of mikdash. It's over there it says you're cutting it off. You're bringing it, cutting it off. It's not in the base of mikdash itself. In the base of mikdash itself, you're allowed to. Outside the base of mikdash, you're not allowed to. It's a very nice teretz. Yosef Abaya sitting. Kamala Shemaita. He's saying over his teacher's teretz, Rabbi Yosef's teretz. Depends where this is done. A sphere of Safra Abaya or of Safra Estabaya. Someone's reading a scroll on the threshold, and it rolls away from him. So it says that he's allowed to roll it back. He's allowed to roll it back if it's still in his hand. So the problem is that if he drops it and he goes down to get it, he's going to be carrying. Look at what we're doing here. We're looking at a sefer. Let's consider the sefer like mikdash, like a karban. And we're going to be lenient about that. And we're not going to make a gzeira that you're not allowed to roll it back because you may drop it and then end up carrying. And we don't make a gzeira over there. You just told me that outside the base of mikdash we make gezeiras on karbanas, just because the karban doesn't make any exception. It's only in the base of mikdash. But over here, he's not in the base of mikdash. A scroll rolls out, and we don't make the gezeira there. So Abaya responds, "Kimna baskufa karmelis, v'shus ramay veres lefaneh, given the igda biyada filish was namileka." You don't remember that Gemara we had in Masechta Shabbos? Over there, we said that we're talking about that it was the Carmelis was in front of him. It wasn't a real Rishus Harabim. It was anyways only a Derabanan. Okay, which means even if it falls, there's no Issa Deraisa. Okay, so there's not a kasha. Eisvei, you have a question. Another question that Rav Safra asks about. You put the Pesach, you lower it into the pit to cook it. Not to cook it, to roast it, while it's getting dark. Usually, to cook or to roast on Shabbos, you have to cover the coals because you may stoke the coals. It's a gzeira. But over here by the Korban Pesach, we're not concerned, even if it's Shabbos, we're not concerned that you're going to end up stoking the coals. Why not? Because it's a carbon, but it's not in the Beis Hamikdash. It's a raya that we outside the Beis Hamikdash we're also lenient with the Rabbanan when it comes to a carbon. Ishtik Abai is quiet. Kiyosel Kamedi Rabbi Yosef comes to Rabbi Yosef from Leihach Emily Rab Safra. Tells Rabbi Yosef, he told me a good pshat that it depends where the location is. But Rab Safra had a strong question. Amalei, my time like Tishnei, why didn't you respond to him? You could have answered. It says Bnei Chabura's reasoning that we're not concerned about the Bnei Chabura. Those are the people that are working with the people of the group that are the Chabura that join together for the Korban Pesach. They're going to be very careful. His reason means they're extra careful, not to do any malacha. But Abaya held Kainim Zizim Heim Amrinan, Bnei Chabura Zizim Heim Lai Amrinan. He didn't hold of that teretz. He holds Kainim as reason. Stam Bnei Chabura as reason. That we don't know about. So it's a strong kasha for Abaya. Rabbi Yosef held differently. Rava says, Rabbi Lezer, the Amar Machshir Mitzvah as Shabbos. Rava gives us a very interesting teretz. The Mishnah in Pesachim has two opinions. One says it's mutter, one says it's aser. Rabbi Lezer said it's mutter. The Mishnah in Eiruvin says, our Mishnah says that it's mutter. What's the problem? Our Mishnah is the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer. Machshir Mitzvah as Shabbos. The only problem is, we says Vim Bekeli Kama Kanaser. So, Meider Rabbi Lezer the Kama Defshel Shnei Meshaninan. Rabbi Lezer doesn't say that you go out and do mamash the biggest malacha possible. He says the opposite. You try to make the malacha less. So, because it's possible to do it without a keli, you're not allowed to do it with a keli. Maihi. Where do we know this from? That Rabbi Lezer holds whatever you change, you try to change. You try to make the malacha less. The Tanya was taught in a Brisa Kain shall also lay a belas. A kayin that has a wart. So a kayin also is considered a mum, like we said before. So Chaveri Chaytchele B'Shino. This is a little gross, but his friend takes off the wart with his teeth. B'Shinavin B'Keli Lai. He's only allowed to do it with his teeth, not with a keli. Talking about on Shabbos. And Chaveri in Iulai, it has to be his friend. He can't do it either. Mani, who is this going like? We're trying to prove that Rabbi Eliezer holds that you have to do it in the most lenient fashion. If we say it's a Rabbanan, it's in the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, there's one factor that I need to throw into this to make it make sense. That is that there is a machlekes between the Rabbanan and Rabbi Eliezer regarding cutting off some sort of growth on Shabbos, nails or whatever. Rabbi Eliezer holds that it's a chiyuv chatas. Even if you cut your nails with your fingers, Rabbi Eliezer holds that that's a chiyuv chatas. Rabbi Eliezer, that's been so lenient the whole time, is now all of a sudden very machmer when it comes to cutting it off with cutting your nails or hair with your teeth. So if we say that, and the Rabbanan are lenient about that, they say that it's only a Rabbanan, it's kalach yad, and Rabbi Eliezer doesn't hold it. Now, Rabbi Eliezer is lenient in other ways. He holds machshirei mitzvah, zdeicha Shabbos, whatever. But without the machshirei mitzvah part, he's more strict. So if we say it's the Rabbanan that hold that it's anyways a Rabbanan, it's only rabbinic law. So then, malihu malei chaver, what's the difference if he does it or his friend does it? It's all a Rabbanan. It's all a Rabbanan. So it can't be the Rabbanan that say that his friend has to do it. Elalab Rabbi Eliezer damer ba'al machiyat chatas. It must be Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Eliezer says generally this would be a chiyuv chatas because cutting nails or anything off the body in an abnormal way is considered a chiyuv chatas. But even though machshirei mitzvah usually puts off Shabbos if it's preparation for a mitzvah, and this is a kohen that needs to do the avodah. So, but we like to do it as in the most abnormal way possible. We have a raya to what we were saying before, that even Rabbi Eliezer, that's lenient, says that you should try to change to do it differently. The Gemara says, like, really it's Rabbanan. If the wart was growing on his stomach, then fine, he would be able to take it off. It's supposed to be a belas, the Rashash switches it. It's talking about that it was growing on his back or it's growing on his elbow, which he can't bite off. Try it. So the Iolai Matzi Shakla, he can't take it off, so that's why he needs his friend. The Gemara says, "Vi Rabbanan nashkele nale biyad." Let him take it off with his hand. B'tifshet to Rabbi Lazar, and we'll answer a question according to that Rabbi Lazar asked. This is not Rabbi Lazar. This is Rabbi Lazar. His question. Rabbi Lazar machlekes biyad avol b'keli divra kol chayev. The whole machlekes is biyad, but b'keli everyone holds his chayev. Now, this would explain a question. This would Rabbi Lazar had this question what the machlekes was. If we can say that this is the opinion of the Rabbanon, then this would answer that question. That we're talking about that you cut it off biyad. The Gemara says like this: let the friend take it off with his hands as well. Hi, Mai. Take a look at it like this. If you say it's the opinion of Rabbi Lezer that holds it, you're really not allowed to take this off. It's a chiyuv chatos if you do. I know the gaziyad that's a keli. That's why there's a gzeira that the friend has to bite it off. If the friend takes it off with his hand, it's a gzeira, could come to a deraisa which is using a keli, which is the real deraisa. In other words, even if his friend uses a keli, here he's not doing it himself, it's his friend. But if we say it's the Rabbanon that hold that there's anyways no deraisa here, nishkalei nale biyad, let the friend take it off using his hand, not his teeth. And there would be no problem. And that's okay. So what we said over here is that we have a proof that Rabbi Eliezer holds that you try to be lenient as much as possible. Okay.